Thank you so much for watching Riff TV. Now, this interview is obviously with video, but I don't interview everybody on Zoom. That's why I put it on my Talkin' Rock with Meltdown podcast. We talk to rock artists from all over the genre. So check out Talkin' Rock with Meltdown wherever you get your podcasts. And now to today's video interview. Man, you look relaxed. You look sunned. You look like you've spent some time on a cruise ship.
Funny you say that. I just got off a cruise. You called it. You know me well.
Yeah, that one left out of Florida. Is that correct?
Port Canaveral. Yeah, it's basically Cape Canaveral, right? So, it's funny because, you see the NASA, and I've been to the NASA thing before, right? Which is, where they fire off all the NASA rockets. And then as our boat was pulling out of the port, of the Canaveral port, right off the left side of the boat was SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's thing, right? And I think it was the canister, because it was on like this moving platform. So they must fire them off of, I don't know if it's NASA, maybe it is NASA. They fire them off there, and then they just land on top of this friggin'. It's like the thing that goes out and saves the rockets. They can bring it back in and fire it again.
That's cool. Yeah, I left out of there on a cruise ship one time. I was just telling Rudy Zarzo the other day. I talked to him, as you know, and I'd never been on one of these rock cruises, so they're always at a weird time of the year. I just took a couple weeks off for vacation for Christmas. I can't just leave again right away, but
right.
One day I'll get on one of these cruises coming up.
Well, I think part of it is they try to schedule it out of the way of hurricane season. The Kiss cruise, I think, goes during hurricane season because October, I remember doing the motorboat, right, when Motorhead had their debut cruise. And that was in October as well. Fortunately, it was pretty good. We hit a little weather kind of coming down around Florida. I think that one went out of Miami. Miami's a popular port. ShipRocked has gone sometimes out of Galveston, Texas. So it goes across the, across the Gulf and then down to Cozumel. But, it's, I don't really care for that. That can be rough in January. It can be, it can be rough. It's cold. Going out of Florida is always pretty nice. The weather's good. And so it's this one was great. I mean, it's literally smooth sailing, man. It's so cool.
Yeah. And for those people that never been on a cruise before, these cruise guys, they really know their way. Even if there is a hurricane or something, they will figure out a way to avoid it.
Well, the truth of it is, if you were really hauling ass, you could do that whole thing in 2 days, right? Down back, right? But the whole point of it is drive around in the ocean so people drink and gamble, and that's how they make all their money. So, but this boat was great. This was probably the biggest boat that I'd been on, and I think they're even moving up to a bigger one next year. ShipRocked has done really, really well. I've done a lot of cruises for those guys. They did the motorboat cruises. 6-man did the Megadeth cruise, and that one went out of Long Beach to San Diego down to Encinitas. Again, you could almost drive that in a car in an afternoon, right? But it takes like 5 days, to go out and scoot around the ocean so people could party and listen to heavy metal.
So how many times did you jump on stage? Because I know you did that. You did Metallica's one with Randy Blythe,
right?
Lamb of God, which was awesome, by the way. I just watched the video yesterday. Somebody took a great video. I don't know. Did you know that person taking the video there? They were right on stage.
I didn't, so Paul Gargano from Metal Edge was on the boat. And so, and then, Metal Edge, that was the grocery store magazine. Certainly at the kind of the beginning of my career, there was always Hit Parader, Rock Scene, Circus Magazine. For those of us from the Midwest, that's how we found out about concerts. I mean, I didn't live in a Detroit or Minneapolis or anything. I lived in a small farm town 3 hours away from any radio or anything hip and, current going on. So I got most of my rock news, from these grocery store, and drugstore magazines like that. So Metal Edge probably hit the stands, probably, early 80s. So, Paul was on there. He popped it up. He said he got like the last bar of Wi-Fi before the ship left Dominican Republic. And he fired that away. We had just played. We did the Sail Away that day. So there was 2 sets that I did with the Stowaways. The first one was Tuesday evening, and that one was big. I mean, of course, everybody's there in the nighttime. That outdoor deck. There's 4,000 people on the boat. I think the boat had could hold 6,000. So there's 4,000 people that came on board. Plus whatever staff the crew the boat has and everything. So a lot of people. So I don't know, probably a good most people were out there, and they tried to schedule them so things didn't overlap between. There's a big theater up in the front of the boat as well, so most people were there for that. So I played War Pigs. I forgot. God, what's his name? This guy that sang in Raw.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm embarrassed that I can't pronounce his name right now. Chamay or something. I mean, fantastic singer. My God.
So you played all the short songs, apparently, right?
Well, I did. Yeah, I know. I had War Pigs, and then in the middle of the set, I played a Foo Fighter song, which I'd never played a Foo Fighter song before. So I had to kind of learn it, And I don't mean learn it like the part wasn't hard, but just absorb it so that you know it as a fan, so you can take it on stage and you really, know the song. It took a little while because the only Foo Fighter, I don't own any. I think I own one Foo Fighter record that I bought online. Everything else is just stuff I hear on the radio, and I like it, but I don't buy the records.
Yeah.
It's cool, and I think Grohl's great and everything. But and then to see the last song, I played the first, middle, and last. The Beastie Boys, Fight for Your Right to Party, which was a great closer. A few people were getting a little drunk by the end, so it was, it's kind of like, but that was cool. I think Nixie from Stitched Up Heart was on that.
Oh Kerry King, by the way, played the guitars on the original version of that Beastie Boys. Has he ever talked to you about that?
No, he never did. So Rick Rubin, Def Jam,
right.
Beastie Boys run Def Jam. I think that's right when Slayer got signed to Def Jam. So he had Kerry play the guitar. So here's a funny story about Kerry King. So, because he's been a good friend, fantastic guitar player in Megadeth for those first 5 shows that we did back in 1984. And he was just kind of filling in, really. More. We were kind of checking, is he going to leave Slayer, join the band? But Slayer was a thing, but not yet a thing, And they were still kind of in this sort of metal, I hate this, almost kind of a Lizzie Borden look, right? But when he went up to San Francisco with us, and he saw, the real epicenter of thrash metal. And everything that Exodus, obviously Metallica were the reigning kings there. And, just seeing what it was, he went back to LA, wiped the makeup off Slayer and, got down in it. And, Slayer became Slayer that we know. But so it's funny, on one of those gigs, Dave broke a string. Kerry had 2, we all played BC Rich guitars, right? And so Kerry had his Red Mockingbird. I think he had like a Black Warlock or something. And so he happened to be playing the Black Warlock. Dave broke a string on the Rich Bitch, the guitar that everybody saw him in Metallica with. He was playing that. And so he grabbed Kerry's Red Mockingbird. And it's so funny. Somebody took a picture of that, and that's the cover of the Megadeth anthology, is Dave with that Red Mockingbird. It's Kerry's Mockingbird, right? He then, we go back to LA, and we had a manager, Jay Jones, who then, right after Kerry was in the band, our drummer, Lee Rausch, quit. And so you just realized this wasn't for him. So Jay Jones comes in the picture, gets Gar Samuelson to start playing drums in the band, right? And Gar worked at BC Rich Guitars, and his brother Stuart worked there, and Chris Poland was temporarily working there for a little while, right? Like doing some stuff. So I was just with Chris this last weekend in Atlanta at the Days of the Dead convention, and we played a Kings of Thrash show. And
right.
And so I was telling him a story. I said, think about it. So the Kaler Bridge, right? So there's 2 ridges. Floyd Rose, which is basically what Eddie Van Halen went on to use, and the competitor was Kaler. Kaler was an easy drop-in replacement with a little bit of routing. Anybody could put a Kaler on their instrument. So Jay sells to Kerry gets from Gar a Kaler Bridge, right? So he puts it on that Red Mockingbird, and all that Slayer, that like wang bar, whammy bar shit is from that. I can almost guarantee you started from that Kaler. And I was talking to Chris, I was telling the story. He goes, dude, I put the Kaler on there. That was me who put it on there. He brought it in, and I was like filing it away and, doing all this stuff. So it's like, small world, who knew?
I remember one time when you were here at the radio station a few years back before the pandemic, and we were walking through the halls, and I can't remember exactly. I think it was a picture of Kiss you saw on a wall, and you started talking about how
how, Kerry King would, you'd go over to his house and his dad was a cop and his mom was a housewife or something. And Kerry'd be in the back, nailing pentagrams down or something.
Yeah, no, literally in the living room floor, he was making one of those, either the big nail, he was either making that or that pentagram belt thing that he had there for a while. Yeah, it was, and the Slayer guys, they all lived right by each other. They all lived at home with their parents, and so they were, Tom and his brother, who was one of their techs, they all lived there, and Slayer rehearsed in Tom's garage, the family's garage over there. So yeah, it was a family thing.
Yeah, it's so cool that you are such a big part of that thrash history. I just saw the guys from Anthrax over the weekend and Exodus, as a matter of fact. But you played with Randy Blythe. Now, how do you get to play with Randy, and why did you guys choose Metallica's One? What that was on ShipRocked?
Dude, I just went where they told me. I played what they asked me to play. That was all. I'm serious. And I've known these guys for years. And, this show was really run well. They had a house band out in Nashville, a drummer, bass player, guitar player. And the bass player could also double on guitar, which he did on the songs that I played on. So, and on One. And as you can hear, they're great players. They're really good guys. And, so, there was a couple of other songs that were on the set that ended up switching out for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. So I know One just as a fan listening to it and hearing it, but it's a whole other thing when you dig in and you put your instrument on and you're really digging in the parts. And of course, that one is quite difficult because it's very hard to hear the bass on the record, right?
I was going to say, yeah, is there a bass on that song? I don't even know.
Well, so it's Mike Heller from the Lucid, right? Also plays in Raven and Fear Factory. He's like the biggest Metallica fan ever. So one night we're bullshitting on text and he sends me a version of it, that has bass. It's that Injustice for Jason or something, right? So he sends it over, and he even said, he goes, I don't think this is Jason even playing this, but someone recorded bass and put it on YouTube. So I was listening to it, and I got to say, it helped. It helped kind of. There's a couple of parts that I was like, oh, okay, I would not have heard that, and now we get so used to hearing it without bass that once you put bass in it, I'm going, maybe I should turn down. Maybe we shouldn't have bass on this song. Maybe, pay homage to the great song that it is, So, it's interesting. And then I did hear, I guess because of Guitar Hero, now all these stems for all of our songs are all over the internet. Once Guitar Hero put, even the Rust in Peace stuff, people send me, dude, I heard your bass soloed from Rust in Peace. I'm like, how the hell did you get that? And I learned it's from Guitar Hero. So there's one of those out there of Jason's part, from, Metallica songs, right? So I heard it. So I listened to that and I was like, okay, I get what he's doing. I would probably do this. And so, it's kind of one of those things when it's an homage, so we're not total karaoke. We don't have to play it exactly the same. So I kind of created a part that I felt, was right for the song.
Have you heard the new Metallica stuff?
I have. I like it. I think it's very cool. Just as much as everything with those guys, they're like Apple. When they do a product launch, it usually comes off pretty fucking cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, a new Metallica album is like a new iPhone launch. It's pretty much awesome. And that just out of nowhere, I was in Poland working. I've got this group Dieth. Over there, we're getting ready to drop a record this summer on Napalm Records. And I was over there shooting the videos. This is November. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes, this, Yellow.
Lux Eterna. Yeah.
Yeah. New album or, new album announced, new single, new tour announced with Pantera and Five Finger and all this stuff. You're like, geez, I mean, this literally just dropped out of the sky. I don't think any of us saw it coming. And which I thought was so cool. And yeah, I mean, that first single especially I thought was very cool. It's look, at this point, there's only 12 notes in the chromatic scale. We've played them all in almost every possible combination of how to play them, so it's like, how do you now at album, whatever it is for them and whatever, even with Megadeth, it was like, geez, we're on how many albums now? And how do we not repeat ourselves yet still keep street cred and play to those fans that want to hear us do that. Yet, you're not the same guy you were when you recorded One, right? You're not the 1987 Metallica. Yeah. You're now this. So, I think as we age into our career and we age into our sort of artistry, if you will, you're always looking for how do you sort of scratch the itch and satisfy all parts of kind of your creative thing there. And it's interesting for me, as I've got like kind of four bands that I do it.
I thought it was more, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've whittled it down. Well, it's one of the things that I found that going out and playing. I mean, especially when we first in 2002 when Megadeth had disbanded and F5 kind of started just sort of unassumingly. They invited me to jam with them, and we wrote some songs one afternoon. It's like, that's really cool. It's like, yeah, let's go back and do that on Thursday. That was fun. Let's do more of that. And I think that's how the best musical settings happen, unless it's a big group and you get the job and they hire you to be their new, touring musician or something, or play on a record. When things sort of form organically, that's how they used to happen, at least when I was growing up in Minnesota or whatever. And, you kind of fall into a room with some guys and you start playing and it's like, wow, we got a thing, this works. And, that's how these things develop from there. So, all of them, have, Dieth, the Lucid stuff that we did, even the Ellefson Soto record that I put out back in October was stuff that I was writing with my guitar player, Andy. And then, Kings of Thrash, is even that started really, Jeff and I were writing material. We were sitting at the Rainbow one night and he started singing me this riff that he had from like 1988 on the So Far So Good, So What record. He started singing and I go, dude, I totally remember that riff.
And this is recently?
This was back. Well, it was a year ago now. It was in January. It was back in January. Yeah. Which, seems like it was just a couple of months ago, but it was a year ago now.
Yeah.
We were working on, I had interviewed him. I called him in to interview him for the Nick Menza movie that we're working on, the documentary. And so this was my life, the story of Nick Menza. So as we, then we reconnected and we go out to dinner, we're hanging. He sort of sings this riff to me and like I said, let's go in the studio. So we went into Mike Heller's place there in LA where we cut all the stuff for the Lucid. And we just sat there for a couple of days and wrote 4 songs and it was like, this is super awesome. And so we've got one of them now that we've got the lyrics and putting the vocal melodies together that will probably bust that out here on the new tour coming up.
Well, you mentioned Paul from Metal Edge. He's married to a Detroiter. Jeff Young, of course, is from Ann Arbor. You got Vinny in your band from Detroit, from the Lucid. Vinny, of course, from Sponge. And now you got a couple songs with Violent J, which came out of completely left field. And that Sweet Tooth song is so awesome. And has anybody from the Faith No More camp given you any feedback on that one, or have they heard it?
Sure. Yeah, well, we went to them to get their permission because it's kind of like when Weird Al does considered a parody, right? You have to go to the artist or the writer and ask them for permission to rewrite their song. And they said, yeah, no problem. They get all the money. We didn't, which is fine. It's like, look, that was Vinny's idea. Vin, as you know, is just a complete, he's just so fucking cool, man.
He's just a creative mastermind.
He is awesome. And it was his idea to call, Violent J because he lives there in the hood in the neighborhood close by. And so it was his idea to get him on the record. So, whatever Vinny wants to do, I just go with it because it's just always cool. So, and he originally started rewriting the lyrics for it, kept kind of the same melody, rewrote the lyrics. So yeah, we went to Faith No More. They loved it. They thought it was super cool. They totally gave us their blessing on it. So we were able to use the song and so for those listeners or viewers that haven't heard it, Sweet Tooth from the Lucid is basically our remake of Faith No More Epic with a rewritten lyric to it.
And it's kind of cool how Violent J is way over here in left field or whatever, and Vinny is on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, and they kind of meet in the middle. Because Violent J does you know what I'm saying? When it comes to like the first chorus, and it's like complete opposites, and it just seems to work.
100%. And that's what's so cool about the collaboration is, two different worlds, and, of course the headlines are, Megadeth guy and Insane Clown Posse guy get together. And, the funny thing is you're right. It was very random, and we knew it was going to make some headlines and turn some heads, which great rock and roll should, and if you don't have some haters, you're probably not famous enough. I've learned that. I've learned that along the way. So the funny thing is, like the guy down at my local UPS store, right? Like I go in and I know he's a big metalhead, and right away he goes, dude, I have a big ICP tattoo down my leg. I said, brother, you are exactly the guy who gets it. He loved it. Like he, right. So it's funny, like Megadeth fans, Insane Clown Posse fans, they aren't so different. And there's a lot of them that cross over because, they're kind of the bastard children of genres, so to speak, right? That we all kind of beat to our own drum. Even within our subgenres, we were the more radical ones of the genre, right? So the ICP fans, I was watching interviews, Dr. Phil is interviewing Violent J, and he's like, I love Insane Clown Posse. I love me some ICP, like Dr. Phil of all people. So
I like some of their stuff. Have you met Violent J in person?
I did. Yep. And he was actually at he was at the Days of the Dead convention in Atlanta here last weekend.
Just last week.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that wasn't the first time you met him, is it?
That was the first time I met him.
Oh,
I'd never met him before that.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
Yeah. And, look, we make a lot of records like that, right? It's like, you make records and this one was, because we started working on this back in, I guess it was probably early 2021. So about a year ago, we were working on this EP, and then Vinny came up with the idea he goes, hey, I'm going to call Jay and see if we can get him on the track. And I forgot I think we did Sweet Tooth first, and then he brought him in to do Saddle Up and Ride, which was that first single that we put out right before Christmas. So
it's cool how that works. Like I said, living here in Detroit for the half my life, it's like, ICP is just kind of woven into the underground fabric, if I can say that.
Yeah, whereas Kid Rock and Ted Nugent would be, the big guys, or Bob Seger, right?
Yeah, Alice Cooper, that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. Then
Alice
ICP
Cooper is more by where you are now, so.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he's basically the mayor here. Anytime they need anything done, they don't even call the mayor; they call Alice. Have him go and do it.
So you got the Kings of Thrash. Now, that's going to be coming up. I did theme dress, by the way.
Nice, I love it, dude. The Machine Shop's got great swag. I saw people on the boat on ShipRocked that had Machine Shop.
Yeah,
it's like you're in the cool club if you've been to the Machine Shop,
Yeah, I bought a bunch of Machine Shop shirts for Christmas presents this year for people out of town that don't even know what it is. But I'm like, these shirts are cool, and Kevin's a great guy, as you know. And and you're coming to town now. Killing Is My Business. So Far, So Good, So What. You're doing all those records. I just actually listened to So Far, So Good, So What. Say I gotta bring it up and have you sign it. But I got the picture disc.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah,
so, very cool.
Yeah.
And we got a little surprise on that. I've been talking to my friend Chuck Beeler, who lives near you in Detroit there. So we're talking to him about coming up and joining us to jam a couple of songs with us, since that's the record he recorded.
Listen, last time I talked to Dave Mustaine, I recorded, for people that don't know, I recorded Chuck's parts for the audio book of the thing that came out in like 2019 or whatever it was. But
the Rust in Peace book. Yeah.
Right. And so Chuck kind of all of a sudden went radio silent on me, and that's kind of like par for the course of what he does. But if you need me to help get him up there or whatever the case is,
take some drumsticks over to him. Hey, dude.
Yeah. Have you talked to him lately or?
I have through our friend Brian, we've been communicating. Chuck's father had just passed over the holidays, so it's kind of and that's when I said, "Hey, man, tell Chuck to let's get it going, man. Let's rock it. Let's come out and play." Because he joined me when we played at the Token Lounge when I came through on an Ellefson solo tour there. He came up and played, I think, 4 songs, and he played great. He played.
He did.
He's got this really kind of behind the beat, again, Chuck listens to DRI and Steely Dan, right? And somewhere in the middle is where he lives, So
I love Steely Dan. Let's do them all the time.
And so, so Chuck, he's a great player. And I tell you, when he played with me that night at the Token Lounge, it really felt like So Far So Good, So What, you know, because drummers all have different feels, as every musician does. And, you know, it's funny, I played with a tribute band, a Megadeth tribute band down in San Antonio on New Year's Eve. And
Really?
they had been my backing band on a solo bass story show that I did. And so they formed after Nick Menza died. So they basically, you know, they played all this Megadeth stuff. But in particular, I said, why don't we just play the Rest in Peace album top to bottom? It'll just be fun to do. So we did, just top to bottom. And the guy played like Nick. He pushed everything. Nothing was relaxed. Everything was fucking just hyper and vigilant. And I said, you know, you can pull a couple of these things back. He goes, man, this is how I know how to play this stuff, because I learned it exactly like the record. And then later in the night, we played some other non-Megadeth stuff, and he was a great drummer. He really know how to, you know, kind of push and pull and have the feel for stuff. But it's funny how, you know, these guys, they learn this shit exactly as they heard it on the, if a fill is rushed, they play it rushed, you know? And so Chuck, you know, being an OG and performing on So Far So Good, So What, when I play those songs with him, it really feels like that. You know, he's just got the right, you know, just where he kind of places the snare drum hit and the kick drum and stuff. It really feels like it. So, you know, Jeff Young, Chuck, and I haven't played together since Donington, 1988, Castle Donington, which is now the Download Festival, but the Donington show we did with Maiden and Kiss. So I think it's pretty fucking legendary, man. I think it's pretty awesome if we can get him up there.
Well, you let me know what I need to do to make this happen, because, you know, I'll pick him up and drop him back.
Totally, yeah. You're the monkey in the middle to make it all happen. So I'll definitely be leaning on you if I need your help.
But I remember when you guys played that show here, you guys played. I know you played Hook and Mouth. Did you play anything else with Chuck, or was that the only song? I'm trying to recall.
I think we played Hook and Mouth, Anarchy. Did we play Liar? Maybe. I forgot what it was. It was at least a couple songs. Yeah. It may have been up to 4, but you're right. It may have only been a couple, but yeah, he played perfectly fine. He practiced hard for it. You know, he's not been out so much as a working musician, as far as I know. So, but I mean, look, he's part of the story. And this year, you know, year's, you know, our 40 years since we started the band, you know, in 1983. So, and even over in Minneapolis, I called my friend Greg Handevitt, who we moved to LA together, met Dave, you know, over the case of Heineken, as the story goes. We lived right beneath him. And, you know, that's how it goes. And it was Greg's idea to call the band Megadeth. You know, he's another founding member of the group. So I'm having him come up in Minneapolis, and we're going to do some deep dives. I said, what songs did we play with Dave right when we first met him? And he actually mentioned a song from No Life Till Leather that made it onto Kill 'Em All. So we're going to bust one of those songs out, I think, in Minneapolis. So that's the whole goal of this, man, is to really go back to the roots, you know, small clubs, kick-ass thrash songs, even our meet and greets that we're doing, where it's like, you know, these aren't the, you know, several $100s to do a handshake and a picture and the drive-by. It's like, bring all your shit, you know, bring your 85 Megadeth records and picture discs, you know, bring them all, your jean jacket patches, we'll sign everything, you know, let's hang out, let's tell stories, let's you know, let's go old school on this one.
Do you miss playing the big arena shows? I know you're on stage, like you said, for like 4,000 people, but, you know, now you're playing like clubs and different things like that. Do you miss it at all?
You know, there's a place for all of them, you know? I mean, yeah, the Ship thing was big, man. I mean, that was like playing a mid-sized arena, you know, out on the deck, as people were piled up 3 tiers high. I mean, you know, that was a real gig, you know? And, you know, then we go and we play these clubs. You know, I saw a review of our Phoenix show that I think the guy really hit it on the head. He said, you know, to see me and Jeff and to hear these songs performed in a, you know, say a 500-seat club, he put the connection together that these songs were written back in that day when that's the size of how big Megadeth was. These songs were written to be played in those size venues. And as the group got more popular, and we started playing bigger venues, the thrash stuff didn't translate as well. And that's why we started to slow some of the tempos down in the 90s, like for Countdown to Extinction and Euthanasia, Cryptic Writings. You know, the songs started to change a little bit to accommodate the venues we were playing, of course, radio, you guys in particular, Riff has, always been a huge supporter of Megadeth from, late 80s or 80s, Peace Elves on through, so not just the venues we played, but the station itself, supporting, all the singles we put out. And, Cryptic Writings was a huge era for us. It was a deciding factor. Are we going to just continue just kind of, doing, thrash metal in that, or are we going to kind of reform the sound a little bit to stay competitive in the mix of what was happening? And us, we talked to Iron Maiden's manager about managing us at that point. And, they're, obviously what he did with Maiden worked well because they just kept the band on the road, tour. And, that's how he built and sustained Maiden. And for us being an American band, we knew we had a whole other audience here in America, that to just be on tour outside of the world or outside of the US would be to leave this whole, territory unattended to. So we took a different approach. We actually got, Bud Prager, and he had managed Foreigner back in the day. And so, he had, sort of an understanding of, that kind of music. And his partner, Mike Renaud, had managed Corrosion Conformity, and they were on the Euthanasia tour with us. So that's kind of how we made the decision to keep our, our base here in America. And Cryptic Writings was a record that we intentionally, we wrote a lot of stuff. In fact, there's some stuff even on Endgame. When I came back to the band in 2010, the song The Right to Go Insane, that was actually a song we wrote for Cryptic Writings. So I knew the bass part. As soon as I came back to the band, they're like, hey, we got to shoot a video next week. I was like, I've learned, I know the bass part. I freaking wrote the part, So that was easy. But yeah, so Cryptic was a record, that really helped us, stay tuned in to, an American audience. And it did well around the world. Japan loved it, and South America. So, I mean, it was definitely the right move. Because as the 90s were a bit of a challenge. Once Seattle showed up and, Nirvana, the anti-rock star killed the rock star kind of thing, that was a challenge. So, we're one of the bands that survived it, and made it through to the other side.
Yeah, it's funny how you talk about how you guys kind of slowed down the tempo. Because I mean, when I got into radio, I was playing stuff off of Rust in Peace. I played Hangar 18 and all that stuff, right? And then Symphony of Destruction came out, and I remember telling somebody, a billion years ago, I go, listen to this song. This song is heavy and it's not fast. It's like it clods along, and it's just thick and full, and you don't have to go to be heavy.
For a short period, right in the late 80s, when Chuck and Jeff were in the band, Doc McGee, who now manages Kiss, managed us just for a brief period. And it was because we needed to get sober and we couldn't get clean. Oh, their artists, Motley Crue, they were all getting cleaned up and getting ready to have big careers. And, he made it very clear we're not dragging, drugged out rock stars around the world anymore, They didn't care if you took drugs; you just had to be productive,
Right.
And we weren't, so we had to go through that. By 1990, we reset. Rest in peace. The story carries on, and we, lived happily ever after, I guess. But the late 80s, and I remember he said, I think it was him who said it. He goes, Metallica's really not even that fast. They just give the illusion that they're fast. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting thing. And he said, he goes, their name is bigger than the band is. Like, that's how the brand is big. And, people weren't using the name brand back then. Now it's such a thing,
right.
Your brand, and it's I hate it. You know what I mean? It's so fucking douchey and corporate. And, I mean, it's true. And I guess if you're a marketing guy, you use that word, because that's the buzzword. But, to those of us who are band guys and musicians, and we grew up in it, we understood Kiss became this thing, and, they taught us how to do everything. Led Zeppelin, the drums were on the floor, and Kiss, they were on a riser.
Sometimes they were way up there.
Yeah. The Rolling Stones had a bottle of Jack and their picks on their amp. Kiss put the picks on the mic stand, because it just looked fucking cooler. So, I mean, Kiss, for my generation, they showed us how to do all of it, and just the presentation, was so spectacular, So, But yeah, it was interesting growing up in that time, the 80s, because certainly Metallica cleared the path for all of us. I mean, they knocked down the big doors that needed to be knocked down with the big guns that they had, and they made it happen. I mean, they were managed well. They obviously wrote great songs. And so that was just, obviously it was that. And for us, we had our own, flavor of that. But to see, I don't know, I guess it was just an interesting time because, I see flyers, from back in the day in the 80s, when I first met Dave, he goes, we're not playing any clubs on the Sunset Strip, which crushed my dreams as a kid from the Midwest, because you hear about all these bands that played the Starwood and the Whiskey and all these things of legend, right? But, you get there and he was right. He goes, by that time, those stages were basically, it's like don't they make people pay now to play the Super Bowl? I think they do, right? For a year or two, they were making people pay to play the Super Bowl.
So were they making bands pay to play those places?
Yeah. Same thing. Yeah, because it's sort of like, hey, our stage is valuable. You want to play here, you're going to pay us. It was like, and I was, coming from the Midwest where we played ballrooms, bars, and clubs, and all the shit that I did growing up as a teenager. I was like, pay to play, like, aren't they supposed to pay us? Aren't we the entertainment? And the more we play, the more beer they sell. Isn't that how this works? So that's why, again, we went up to San Francisco, and packed the places and got paid actually to play, right from the beginning. So we didn't fall into that, but it's like, the places we played in LA, were these, like the Waters Club in San Pedro, the Balboa Theater. I think we played there with Agent Steel and I don't know, some other band, these bands. So we were not a Sunset Strip band,
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of funny that, with Kings of Thrash, we did those 4 shows back in October, and the last show that we played on that little run was at the Whiskey, sold out, stage diving, moshing. I mean, probably the club has never seen in all of its legendary 50 years of existence, So it was super cool, and I'm glad we recorded it. We filmed it. It's coming out on Cleopatra Records March 24th. It's called Best of the West Live at the Whiskey A Go Go.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So in a weird way, this tour is to support a live album. Usually, we were talking about, Jeff brought it up with Kiss. He goes, so remember Kiss did 3 albums and then they finally did the live album. He goes, why don't we just forget the first 3 albums and just do the live album? And I said, that's a great idea. And instead of like doing a live album as part of a tour, the live album will represent the tour, right? And the tour will be to support the live album. So it's kind of funny how we took the Kiss model and flipped it and did it the other way around.
The only thing Kiss did differently is they recorded their live record here,
which was very cool. Very cool, by the way. And they're in like 4 shows or something, right? I mean, now we read in their books about, how these records were made. And, the one thing that I remember reading maybe in Paul's book that I thought was very cool is that up until that point, most live albums, probably some Woodstock or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young live album or something, there'd be people cheering, and then as soon as the band started playing, they pulled the audience track down so you could hear the music, like Jackson Brown, these live, and but whereas with Kiss, they kept the audience track up the whole time,
right?
And I don't even know if the audience track was from a Kiss show. It just sounded fucking cool that there's like an audience. It did. It gave you the kind of this ambiance that, like, man, I'm really at a freaking Kiss concert,
That's cool, because I'm thinking to myself just now, you didn't put anything live with Megadeth, did you?
There was never like, well, no, there was Rude Awakening that we did in 2001. We filmed it here.
Was that just a DVD, or I'm talking like a CD or a record or something, or was that DVD?
Well, it was a CD and album. It was when we had signed our deal with Sanctuary Records, and we had put out The World Needs a Hero. We did the tour. 9/11 happened. We were actually, it's funny, we were supposed to go to, the original plan was to go film it and record it in Buenos Aires, which is why, when Dave put the band back together, he then did that with that One Night in Buenos Aires DVD that he did. That originally was going to be Rude Awakening. But 9/11 happened. It was very sketchy whether we should leave the country. It was just a very weird time, So we ended up
doing the past 3 years we've lived in.
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. It's all coming back, but it's coming back a little weirder and different than it was,
Hey, you were talking you were talking just a few minutes ago about, how everyone kind of sobered up and stuff. There was a lot of sober rock artists on that ShipRocked, wasn't there?
There was. I mean, it's interesting. Younger artists coming into the business, I've just noticed over the years. It's the old adage in the '70s and '80s, oh, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Like that is not their kudo. They're all about vegan. Straight edge.
Yeah.
Save the planet. It's a very different thing. I remember seeing that on a Warped Tour. It's like, this is bizarre. This is like a whole other world of mindset. And it's fine. It's just it's a younger generation. They're into different stuff, but yeah, it's definitely it's that. And so ShipRocked is interesting because ShipRocked is a younger genre of music, right? Active rock, right? And you're in radio, so the demographic of that, of what that is. But a lot of the fans that are on there are the fans who can afford to go on a cruise, so they're my age or in their 30s, 40s, whatever, 50s. But I always say the rockers that if it didn't kill them, it only made them stronger, kind of thing, right? So if you didn't get cleaned up or at least figure it out, you're probably dead, right? So if you're still alive making music, you've probably been through the ringer a little bit, getting your ass kicked by the party lifestyle. And if you're still in the game, you probably got it figured out, whether you're sober or not, or you just went through a phase, whatever it is.
Yeah, I was just talking about this with somebody just last night. And they were surprised to find out that a lot of my friends who are in bands, yourself and many others, are sober.
Well, it's funny that, I think, you're a product of your environment, right? And so, when I grew up and I started playing, I mean, I hadn't, alcohol hadn't passed my lips yet until I was 15, So when I was young, I mean, in all my bands that I was in, none of us, partied. And I remember we got a singer in the band. I don't know, we were, he was in like 10th grade and we were in 9th grade or something. And so like, he started smoking weed and he'd always forget the words. And they're like, dude, you got one job. Remember the words, and he'd get stoned. Oh man, I forgot the words. I was like, okay, this guy's got to go, so, and then, I was always in bands with older guys, right? I remember even when I was like 12, I joined a band with like 16-year-old guys, and these guys knew, Freebird and how to play Ted Nugent songs and all the cool guitar playing at the time. They had hip, cool songs that they knew. And so I always got better because I was around, older guys. I mean, even in Megadeth, I was 18, Dave was 21, soon to be 22, so I was always, I guess the junior thing applied, I was the younger guy in the band, so, but it also, forced me to like pay attention to what's going on in the room and get hip to what's, who's in charge, what's happening here, and be on point, And I think if you're all fucked up and you're on dope, and that is harder, and it's easier. I think when you're partying, it's easier to trend into where, where's the party going? And you tend to be in environments where that's more of a thing. And, it is what it is, but yeah, for longevity, I think, let's face it. I mean, at some point, you can't do that forever, or at least I could, man. I mean, yeah, I tapped out at age 25, and then we made Rust in Peace a couple weeks later. And I think the proof is in the pudding,
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'll tell you what, Dave, we'll cut you loose. Of course, we'll see you here coming up on the 24th of February at the Machine Shop with Kings of Thrash. And by the way, thanks for doing that. The five, for those that don't know, you picked 5 songs with killer bass lines. And people would be surprised how much Motown and Beatles you guys picked between you, Rudy, JD, and Frank Bello.
I guess it's probably our age, right? I mean, so I was born in '64, and by the time I started really hearing any music, it was Neil Diamond on the radio, Motown stuff, Diana Ross and the Supremes and that kind of stuff. And my mom, she was the musician in our house. She sang in the church choir, but she had the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, 45, some Mary Wells, who was in the Supremes, I think. And so, she had music around. She was a big Elvis fan. And it's funny, I was not a big Elvis fan. I didn't, and maybe it's because my mom liked him, and so therefore it wasn't as cool, and then I, of course, later would come to obviously appreciate Elvis. And in fact, I saw my first Elvis movie. I saw Jailhouse Rock kind of a few weeks ago on an airplane or something. I watched it because my mom would sit around and watch Elvis movies, and again, because my mom liked it, like, it's for your parents, And now I've come to appreciate Elvis, And
no matter how old you are, though, you can appreciate the bass lines that some of these guys wrote, like Paul McCartney. I just heard him talking. I was telling Rudy Zarzo about this. That Paul McCartney said one of his favorite bass lines he ever did was "The Benefit of Mr. Kite," because he said that it goes the opposite of where the lyrics are going, or whatever the case is. And you're a musician, you probably get that a whole lot better than I do.
Well, it's interesting. So I went to Paraguay some years back. I was on a South America, 2019, I guess it was. I did a South American solo tour down there, right? And so I was in Paraguay, and there's a guy who's a huge Beatles fan. He's like a home builder or something. So he's well funded. He's got a lot of cash, and he's got this whole Beatles museum that he bought replicas of all of their equipment from every era of the band, from the Hamburg days, from the Cavern Club, the Liverpool days, to Abbey Road, to the Ed Sullivan Show. I mean, it's amazing. It's like a Guitar Center of only Beatles stuff, right? Every microphone, every cable, the way it comes off the mic, every guitar. I mean, everything about it's amazing. So I learned a lot about that whole thing. And I met Pete Best was there, right? The original drummer. That's he was staying across the street. So I had to go over and meet him. And in a big part, there's that book, The Art of Not Giving a Fuck, right? And both Dave and Pete Best are in it. So I was like, I asked him, I said, so I got to ask you, what's it like, not being a Beatle? I mean, you were there, you did all the grunt work in the club days. And then when it came time to cut the first record, he got ousted and they put Ringo in, and he's a sweet guy. And he said, well, I had to just get on with my life, And he said, I still had me bands and they played me drums and, did his thing. So he was, I said, there's a book that singer of my band, Megadeth, is in, and you're in it. And he laughed and he chuckled and he says, yes, I've heard about that. And, I said, you were shown in a good light. So, I thought that was pretty funny, but I guess this rich guy would fly him down there and every year, and he'd play 5 songs in this guy's Beatles cover band, right? Tribute band or something. So he got to kind of have his little thing, and it was fun. But Paul was, I guess, when he was hired, it was kind of John's band. I think, right? John kind of ran the thing, and so Paul joins the band, and Paul was a guitar player, and I think it was literally, as I understand, a flip of a coin who was going to play guitar or bass, and Paul, some would say got the shortest straw and became the bass player. To me, I'd say he won big, but so he became the bass player. So that would explain why his bass lines are very melodic. He's obviously a songwriter and a singer, so he probably rewrites a lot of the stuff on piano and guitar. He doesn't just write everything on bass. So, and I think that's a big fallacy with bass players. These bass players tend to just get very bass nerdy and think only about bass. And I think I'm lucky because I learned how to play piano and saxophone and bass, and I took up guitar and I learned how to play drums. And you become a musician, so that you understand what the other musicians in the room are playing. You're not just my bass is all that matters. I'm the bass player. It's like, well, it doesn't. You're just a member of the tribe here, So I think it makes you able to relate more to other musicians. And you're right. The Motown era. I mean, those bass, in fact, the Motown house right by you there in Detroit is amazing. It's so cool because they cut all those records in that little garage.
Yeah.
Right. The 2 houses. So funny. There's a funeral parlor. I remember when I went there's a funeral going on. Right. And then there's the 2 houses, the Berry Gordy, houses there. One was the actual kind of record company offices, and attached right to it is a house where that was basically the studio where they cut all the records in the fucking garage, turned into a studio. And James Jamerson, of course, is the legendary bass player from that era. But, the other era that was awesome for great bass playing was the 70s with disco.
Right. Yeah.
Those guys were basically 70s was the new Motown, man. And there are 3 things going on at that time. Kiss was huge. The Sex Pistols just came out, and disco, right? And I loved all 3 of them. And you would never tell anyone you liked disco unless you wanted to get beat up on the playground, right? So I kind of kept that as my little, my little secret, right? Because I would listen to the bass playing. I'm like, these guys are freaking amazing, man. And the octave thing, and there's just a style that they played. Michael Anthony kind of played a lot of those sort of octave lines in early Van Halen stuff.
Yeah, and then Kiss made "I Was Made for Loving You."
Yeah, right. Which isn't it funny when you go see Kiss now? It's one of the biggest songs they have. I mean, to me, it was I kind of tuned out at Dynasty. I was done after Kiss Alive 2. You know, side 4, the original songs, that was kind of, and I just moved on. You know, Van Halen and Boston and other things were coming out. And how about the Boston bass playing? That's Tom Scholz playing bass on that.
Oh, he is.
And yeah, Tom Scholz plays all the bass. In fact, I read a great story. He had so my very first bass was a Gibson EBO that my mom bought for me. And I looked for a Gibson because on the back of Kiss Alive, it says, Kiss used Gibson guitars, right? So I found one, a Gibson EBO. It had flat wound strings. It didn't sound anything like Gene Simmons. I was very disappointed when I got it, but I learned how to play it. And so I read more and more. Bob Daisley from Cut the Ozzy records with the Gibson EBO. Tom Scholz using EBO, but Tom, what he did, I read this great thing in like a bass player magazine. He, being the scientist that he is, he sped the tape up, cut the bass parts so that when he slowed it down, some sort of oxidation of the tape happened. Something happened where the bass got bigger and fatter and sounded just more awesome. So those, especially Don't Look Back, and especially that first record, man, the bass playing on those 2 Boston records is incredible. So go Tom Scholz.
Yeah, I got to drop it on the turntable now that you mentioned it, so I'll have to check that out. But yeah, that's interesting. It's cool. We could sit here and talk all day about tricks that people have pulled in the studio, but I've taken up way more of your time than necessary. David, thank you so much. We'll see you on the 24th, and of course, hit me up to pick up any loose drummers you need. Yeah.
If I need you to go get Chuck out of the house, no, it'll be great, man. It'll be a nice Detroit family reunion, man. It's going to be super cool, and I think to see Jeff and Chuck back on stage again, 3 of us, jamming these tunes, it'll be super fun. So I'm looking forward to it.